Okay, is it working? Yeah, good. Hello, welcome everyone. I want to well, first I want to see kind of what's in you from last week. If there's anything, I realized that there was one bit that I didn't a loop I didn't fully close. Yeah. Well, all of a sudden I did that. That's weird. Hmm. A loop I didn't fully close. I wonder if anyone caught what the loop was, first of all. Well, I mean, it closed in you then. Just didn't close in me. I think probably because maybe what we're not looking for here is loops, but rather spirals. Yeah. But anyway, I'll open it up. Spirals don't close, loops do. I'll open it up to the floor, our distinguished guests, for a moment though, and see how the week's been. What's transpired? Have you thought about the lesson? Do you remember the lesson? Here's a good question before I zip it. um, we've spoken in the past about one's ability to contain, right, as being the definition of one's level of being. In other words, just like a cup, right, you can only contain that which you're big enough or capable enough to do. But unlike a cup, the human has the ability to stretch and grow and reform and reshape. And one of the various aspects of our level of being that demonstrates our ability to contain is what we're able to remember. Yeah, in the form of our memory. It shows, it's a gauge, it's a pulse, if you will, on what our level of being is at this point in time. And if you encounter certain types of ideas in this work and you're unable to recall them, then that shows you kind of areas that you need to stretch your cup to grow your vessel, right? Raise the level of being. There's two aspects of this work, isn't there? There's the knowledge aspect and the being aspect. Yeah. All right. Hmm. I think I would like to ask you directly, Molly, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask
How last
me.
week? Yeah, last week's meeting, how that was for you.
Um,
I'm asking because I saw so many things fly around you, yeah, during
oh,
certain
really?
parts of it. Yeah.
Oh, holy cow. Um, I think the most salient thing that really stuck with me was the very last part, and about your. Oh, we were offline or something like that, about what you're going through, and just how really it is important it is, what resonated is to be true to your own. If you're in a space with, with something happening, it like that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
People, others, no, I mean, yes, and eventually it might happen, we might grow, but I think we mentioned the Tony Robbins thing, and
Mhm.
no.
Right. Yeah.
And the fact that, that to me was your connection to what you're working with when you get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and you write, and what flows through you is like the most important thing. Like that is the key thing. And that was what I guess, I kind of really resonated with in the whole thing. But I mean, I have a whole bunch of things I wrote down, but that was sort of the last sort of, that was the thing that kind of stuck with me, how important that is.
Yeah, it really speaks to purpose, right? And there's two gradations or two levels, I suppose, when dealing with purpose. One, more than that, as I dig, as it digs. Um, Obviously, there's things like planetary purpose, and we've alluded to and hinted about the idea that human life, conscious life, right, of this level and magnitude that we represent, I'll put it that way, is a vital aspect to the planet. She actually needs it. She needs it to survive and to feed her offspring, if you will. So there's that level of purpose, right, which is a sort of a general purpose of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is the grace or the grant to be able to have a personal purpose in life as well. Yeah, and that is not universal. Your purpose, for example, is different than my purpose. I have a very specific, very deliberate purpose. And what comes to, here's the challenging part, because most of the time when people figure out what their purpose is, if they're so lucky, right, to actually figure out what their individual purpose is, what comes back to them is the Reaper card, yeah, in the tarot. The Reaper does. The Reaper is a very natural phenomenon that basically says equal and opposite reaction. Yeah? And if you are not strong to your purpose, if you're not solid in your purpose, and if you haven't achieved a certain degree of unity inside of yourself, then you're the one that gets reaped, right? And you see all of these bright sparks come onto the stage of the theater of life and try to do so much, and then 2 years later you never hear from them again, or they, it's because they weren't aware of this or they weren't prepared for it. Yeah, so you have to be very solid to your purpose, and doesn't mean that you can't waver from it from time to time, but if that is a possibility, which I think it is actually for everybody engaged in a purpose, you have to have certain mechanisms in place that serve as alarms for that, right? One of my alarms is, I'm very sensitive to the atmospheres that build up and the entities and presences and the sorts of things that attend this work and attend me, my life. When they start to back away, it's time for me to respond, yeah, in kind. I'll tell you this, I will never ever sit here and say, I am infallible, I will never make mistakes. That's never going to come out of my mouth. What a better aspect to this would be that I know how to correct it, and I know how to kind of get back on track. And that's for everybody, really. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, what spoke to you last time?
Well, actually, the three models, and this idea of the model three, right? The ability to control the consciousness, right? In just general, I got to say, over the last year or more, this whole my expansion of consciousness. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, just observing it, not just in myself, but as I just kind of do detection on the events of the day. I pay attention, like, for example, I give, say, watching the news and listening to the conversation. And it's because it's not the news, it's how they're talking about the news I find more fascinating than the news itself. And it's like the level of question is different. The level of processing is different. I also look at it in conversations in my just work life and such, and it's evolved. There's more to go. I can see where, awareness. Yeah, I guess I'm observing awareness evolving. And yeah.
Let me ask you a question that ties into this, or last time we spoke a little bit about this idea of evolution, and that it's not so much that we are responsible for the growth, but we're responsible for filling in, right, the already there template, already there plan. And there's a interesting aspect to the notion of evolution from a Darwinian standpoint, Darwin's evolution. of these kind of intermediate species, right? Growing from one thing into another, into another, into another. And um, someone once raised the question, well, if we evolved from apes, for example, then why are there still apes? But I think there's a better question. And the better question is this. If there were intermediate links, why are there not still intermediate links? Because there are apes, there are humans, yeah? Why is there nothing in between? And I'm not just talking about apes and humans, but every species, right? That's actually a deeper, more profound question if you think about it. Because what it points to is what I've been saying all along, that it happens in starts. Everything in creation goes tick, 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 and you don't see, the second hand move from 1 second to the next, if you will. It's like a process of continuous creation going on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a more accurate description rather than evolution, is continuous creation. And so the way this ties into what you're talking about is, are we on that brink now where something has ticked on the planet? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's in other words, there it's curious, right? In 1,000 years from now, for example, are there still going to be Model 2s? Let's say that this transition takes place, yeah, and everyone clicks into this Model 3 mode, which we'll talk about. You're getting the stare down here with your dog.
Okay.
So intense.
All right.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Let's say that humanity takes up the proposition of full up Model 3. Mm-hmm. Will there be any Model 2s left? And more importantly, are there going to be any Model 2.5s? Right? Evolution? No, of course not. How can you be that?
Well, one thing, a model that's opened up, that I've been working on for the last couple of months, I was introduced to a model called spiral dynamics, and it's been fascinating.
Okay.
And it has to do with the growth of, I think, growth of consciousness is what I would call it, right? And what we're seeing, it works on an individual level and it works on a societal level. And to bring it to your question, is that there in a way there is a process, but it's in the individual growing up from age 1 day to age adult, right? But it goes through at a greater clip. So in other words, right, if there was an earlier stage of humanity, like now, you say, like, where's the interim? The interim might be at age 4, but not necessarily at age 25.
You're talking about repeating the template of evolution, or repeating the template of, sure. I mean, it's not exactly true what they say, that the human embryo and fetus goes through every stage of evolution, but it does kind of go in utero, right, in the womb. But it does kind of go through the various templates that were available to it, particularly to the human, right? And just because you pop out into the bigger womb of the world doesn't mean that you've stopped growing, right? There's still more development, more templates to go into. It's just that, see, I kind of have a theory, right? That no one will have to work for Model 3 at a certain point. That will be like the transition from childhood through puberty into adulthood, for humans, I should say. Now, I'm not talking about now. Now, because it's something to grow into, right? You have to make the effort to do it. But if you want to look 1,000, 2,000, or whatever, however many years from now, that will just be part of the process, won't it? Where someone, they go through their whole uteral phases, and then they go through their model 1 and 2 phases, childhood and adolescence, go into their puberty phase, become adults, and then go into their second puberty, which would be into that model 3. Mm-hmm. What does that mean, though? I think we should drive into this. By the way, I will also ask you, Kimberly and Sachin, about it, but maybe it's time to table this or put it on the back burner, because I think it really deserves working into. Easy peasy, isn't it, to throw around terms like model 1, 2, and 3, and are you model 3 prone? But have we actually identified what that means? To be it, to actually be it. Do you have a good sense of that? What that is?
Just to kind of what I'm hearing in there is that is a templated version of a human. I imagine that templated version evolves over time.
Up the bar of creation, there is, yeah.
And there's range to fill in. So if the range, for example, is this, what I'm becoming more and more aware of is how low in the range humanity is today. But if I were to look at that against, if you ask me, like today, if I say the range is this, if you asked me 2 years ago, I'd say the range was this. Mm-hmm. Which points to an evolution in my own awareness and consciousness, that I see greater range now than I did a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I do see that we're filling in a template, right? I think of it in terms of the lousily named junk DNA, where, right?
That's our template, isn't it? That's our future. That's our future.
That's our future. It's there. It's like, it's better to say it's DNA we have yet to grow into. It's not junk, right?
Right.
I can't imagine, that just makes no sense to me whatsoever. We may not know what that future is, particularly from a scientific paradigm, but it's not junk. Right?
Yeah.
But that's the idea, is that if they say we're using, 5 or 10% of our brains, I even say that kind of sarcastically, then that tells me that there's 90 to 95% more that's untapped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
I once found, when I was a child, a brand new born squirrel that had fallen out of the nest. And I couldn't for the life of me tell what it was. I had to get a veterinarian to identify it. Like gray, hairless, about this big, sort of like just a little thing. And it had fallen out of the nest, and couldn't tell what in the world the thing was. And I wonder if you compare us in our current state to us in our fully templated state, if you would even recognize the baby squirrel of humanity for what it turns out to be, or what it has the potential to turn out to be. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this idea of what it actually means to be Model 3, all right, in a bit. Kimberly, what stuck with you?
For me, I really appreciated your exercise.
You're a bit muffled. Maybe can you lean forward just a hair or something?
It should be the earphones. I might just
better.
be talking. Yep. Is that better? Okay.
Uh-huh.
I really appreciated the exercise of going back and rewriting whatever energies might not be aligned with our higher self or higher potential, or whatever you want to say. I did have some questions about what to do with energies that might not be from this lifetime. I feel like there might be more energy there than what I can trace back to childhood. And I'd be curious to get input on that. But I thought the exercise of looking back at where we picked up certain ideas about how things are, or stories or whatever, is a very useful exercise.
Right. Let's talk about that question that you have then. There's not much in this form that you can do about those energies from, like, that, karma, hangovers, whatever, from previous lives, whatever you want to call it, traumatic events even from previous lives. And the reason why is because your soul and your spirit require a physical body in order to process, right? And think of your life as just a series of events, some non-impactful, some pleasant, some painful. Okay, these are all sorts of like frictions and energies that can actually come into your existence at this point in time. Now, what happens when you die is, generally speaking, there are exceptions to this, and I'll explain those in a minute, but generally speaking, what happens when a person dies is they do have a content form, okay? And over time, that just sort of fizzles away. Yeah, like you can imagine, if you light an incense, and you get these kind of, like, every once in a while the incense stick, will release this little plume that eventually just dissipates, and it's kind of fun to watch. My camera's going to pick me up. It's kind of fun to watch, but that's very much like what the content of a person's life does after they die. And again, don't go into dread about it, because there is exceptions. It's what we're doing here is working on the exceptions to it. But what then happens, just like the smoke from the incense, is it doesn't disappear from the room. It leaves a residue. You walk into the room and you can smell it, even if you can't see it anymore. And that's exactly what the content that we store and process and generate and refine and can't do anything with, and so on and so forth, that's what happens. And it's called a bank of force in the astral light. Okay, now the reason why we get so many people having memories of their prior incarnations is to do with something called proneness, right? Tuning fork. You might have certain configurations in this life that make it very easy for you to pick up on the scent of either a previous life of yours, in many cases, or the scent of someone else's previous life who had similar dispositions as you. And it's very difficult to get to the point where you can go, I know what I was in my last life, not who. Right? There's no such thing as who you were in your last life. It's what you were in your last life. So the content in you, based on the life that you're in right now, is the only thing you can really work on in this present. There is a state that you can get to with development where you can actually go back and correct things in the astral light, but it's very non-personal. Okay, you don't look at it and say, that was my blunder in a previous life. You say, that's not a useful print in the astral light. It needs to be overwritten. There's a big difference. Do you understand the difference? It's not personal at that point. It has to do with being medicinal and corrective to anything you see in the astral light, or sense, or can comprehend, connect to in the astral light that needs overwriting. Yeah. In the Eminent Way work many years ago, Leo had created sort of, I guess you would call it a sanctuary, known as the House of Little E's. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, you too? Okay. The House of Little E's? Yeah. Now, in British history, right, which is where Leo was from, in British history, the House of Little E's was where they tortured people. It's where, where they committed heinous, vile, horrible tortures on people. And so you've got to ask yourself, why would Leo name this sanctuary of quietude and peace the house of little ease? Well, it was to do just that. It was to overwrite something in the astral light that he was able to print over. Okay, now Leo didn't invent the house of little ease. He didn't support it, to my knowledge, in any previous life, right? It was never a victim of it. It was an act towards humanity from the standpoint of, and the planet, actually, because the planet has a hard time processing things like that as well. So I hope that helps. But separate, the personal, you can work on this life, right? From the moment you were born, whatever energies you've processed, collected, whatever, you can work on those now. Once you die, they become part of the astral light, and you can work on them, but not in a personal way. It's not personal development. It's more like planetary development or work on behalf of humanity, of humans. What do you think of that?
I'm not sure I totally get it. I think you were talking about your soul spirit needing a physical existence to heal energies, and it seems like once you die, you don't have that physical existence anymore to continue to work on it. I think of, like, when I look at some of the energies that I carry within, I can't go back to any experience that I've had in this physical life that I can pin it to. And so I'm sort of trying to figure out how I can work through these energies that exist, but that I can't attach to anything that I've experienced in this life.
Right. Okay. I may have misunderstood your question. I jumped to the idea that you were trying to correct something from a previous incarnation. Was that not the case? Or is that the case?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't have personal experience with past lives. People have suggested past lives, but I don't have any personal. So I don't know. I guess what I do know is that I have energies that I can't associate with anything from this life.
Right. So now we're on the realms of what to do with those, and they really have to be transformed. If you are carrying them in your aura, and it's not just a residual that you're sensing in the astral light from some proneness in yourself, you have a couple of options. One, shield, right? Shield and do your electrobics and rid yourself of them. Or two, transform them. And we've talked, there's a whole body of exercises in this work to do with things like negative emotions. Yeah, I'll pause. Sure. What's up, Sachin?
I wonder if there is a third, which is learn to live with them without necessarily letting them impact you in a diseased way.
Well, that means that you're processing it, right? You can actually process these things out of you. If you learn to live with it, that means that I shouldn't say processing, I should say transforming it. You've transformed it into something else. Because you can't just live with it as it is, right? We've talked about this neutral vector in there. All you can do is change your neutral vector in how you handle it, how you deal with it. Yeah, people live with all kinds of traumas and so on and so forth, all kinds of energies. But what I'm going after is like bordering on, like I said, alchemy, where you take things like, well, we use the example of negative emotions, yeah, anger or whatever kind of crops up in a person, and intentionally put it in the pressure cooker of self and elevate it. There's a very specific process, right, about how to elevate that into something finer. It gives you so much more juice for care in the end if you don't just go brah and get rid of it. And yet that's kind of advanced training still for where we're at, at least in the progression of this work. Yeah, it's like the the 10 commandments. No one can live by them, right? That's why they're so difficult. It's because it takes a conscious person to be able to live by them. Yeah. Especially the ones that JC added on top of them, right? Not only don't commit adultery, don't even ever think about it. Yeah. Can you imagine? That says consciousness. That says the ability to deal in consciousness as we deal in energy now, and as they dealt in matter in Model 1. Right, but Kimberly, so back to the idea. At this stage, clean it out. You have some electrobics, right? You've got some electrobics training. That will actually go pretty far in this. By the way, on the website, you can see the whole Term 1 manual, and I plan to get back to that and do videos, but you can find the whole Term 1 manual there, so if you need a refresher, plus the video on number 2. That would be the first thing. The second thing is determine whether it's part of your essence or part of your personality. You know, we have these ideas, right, of the essential aspect of oneself versus just things we pick up along the way. And personality traits can also just be promises. You know, you might feel an energy, not because you ever had anything to do with it, but because it's around. You know, what I'm trying to do here in this is, if there's something attached to you, which I don't really strongly feel like there is, right, something kind of draining on you, then electrobics will help clean that out. Yeah, we'll go through more advanced work on that as well. If it's a proneness, for me, I would say that's almost a good thing, because it means that you have the ability to be very sensitive, and that's one of the requirements of doing this kind of work. Just don't personalize it, right? Very important discipline of self in this work, to know that you are a processing machine, that you are not the food being processed. Yeah, you're the sausage maker, not the sausage. So yeah, that's interesting. You can then have this attitude of, that's interesting, look what's going through me, right? Have this sort of objectiveness about you. Yeah, back to the analogy of the, you know, the sausage machine, right? If the person puts in bad meat, the sausage machine doesn't blame itself. Right? If it's got any consciousness about it, it just goes, oh, that's bad meat, right? But it doesn't let it affect their confidence in themselves. Yeah, doesn't go, I'm a terrible sausage machine. I don't know what they call sausage machines. not, not an expert in that, I guess. I'll have to go do some research now. I'm better equipped next time. Right. We'll keep coming back to it, okay?
Thank you.
Pierce, can I also suggest, you know, out of everything that Pierce said, maybe take a small piece of something that you want to transform and try it. Out of all of that that's, you know, in you or coming to you, take a small piece. Don't take the most difficult piece. Take the easiest piece and try it. See if it works.
You know, you're right. Those lessons in Core 101, those 7 that we just finished, they're all geared towards this kind of thing anyway. Yeah. By the way, those are all available on the website now too, and along with the videos. So if you need some refreshers, you can always also go there. All right. Okay, Sachin. What trickled in you? Percolated.
Oh, mine's very, very practical. I'm doing stuff, and so I won't toot my horn. Instead, I'll post a couple things in the chat that I've been trying out. That one is these are not my quotes, but I'm trying to bring these into my life, and I'm referencing whose quotes they are at the bottom. Right? So first is language is the garment of thought. Just really, before I say anything, before I do anything, really think through and just take that what is coming through has something in it. There is something that is causing what I'm saying. And so I'm always saying, hey, and I'm looking at that from me, but I'm also looking at others. And if I find an incongruence, then I'm poking further. Okay, you said this, but let me make sure that I understand what is underneath it, and then I ask those questions. So, that's the first thing that I'm looking at. Would love to pause there and hear everybody else's thoughts. The other one, the next one is very big. It's a big one. So maybe talk about language as a garment of thought, because Pierce, you're a linguist, right? You have a way with words, so I thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think we've said in this work too that language is a cloak, right? A cloak of force. Same thing, right? Cloak of what you're processing. It tells me, Sachin, that things are developing and growing in especially in your emotional center, right? The things that you're saying. The thing that caught me the most was especially about this notion of probing for truth. Yeah. Children automatically have this ability. They know when it's true and when it's bullshit, don't they? They know it. They just do. Until that fateful day that they discover that their parents cannot read their minds like they can read their parents' minds. Interesting. And they begin to lie. Yeah. That first lie, that's what kind of splits the emotional center in two, and the rest is downhill from there. So yeah, good. This work is, I can see it. That's why I sit here, my friends. I sit here to see these changes like this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm taking. It's one of those. I mean, really taking everything and applying it to everything. So when all of these teachings and learnings applied to life, it's very small impact. It's those little things. I think there's another thing that we can talk about. I didn't add that quote, but we don't live a dystopia. We don't live in a, what's the opposite of that? It's the
utopia.
We definitely don't live in a utopia. I think everybody will agree to that here. We don't live in a utopia. You might say we go between back and forth, but we live in what is described as a protopia, which is we all together, creation, the laws of creation together. We are all making a better and better and better opia, if I may use it. We are all contributing to make it better. It's not linear. It goes up and down, up and down. Sometimes the down feels very far down, but then the up is also very far up, or it was up very far up before that, and so the down feels far down.
As long as the trend is going this way, right, upward.
It's up and to the right. That's how it is. That's the whole point of consciousness, is that everything gets better and better. Mm-hmm. You could say sometimes it needs to be set back very far. Like, I mean, is humanity going to, like, the Greeks got shut down, the Egyptians got shut down, the Romans got shut down. Well, they got shut down pretty badly because they had progressed very far. Mm-hmm. And so we had to start back because they, so that's, maybe this current civilization gets shut down. I don't know, maybe, who knows? So that's sort of how, like, my changes are small, and they are wide, and they're across the board to everything that I do. And it is starting to show up in unexpected ways. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's good for me to meet with people such as yourselves that actually do this work, right? I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have been associated with this work that haven't ever done the work of it, and it's just like it just doesn't resonate with me, right? So
yeah, that takes us into the second quote that I posted, which is
right.
So I think I was lost. Pretty certain I was lost. I probably got lost when I came to the US. So 20 years ago, started to get lost continued to get lost for 5-6 years, and then got really lost, and then was lost for 10 years, and then I've been slowly getting myself educated for the last 5 years, and the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years really, since me and Kim got together. So late 2019, 2020, 2.5 years. I've been starting to act, and I'm starting to get to the point now where I'm starting to get some consistency.
Yes, that's
So
important.
that's again across the board for every aspect of life.
Yeah.
How I sleep, how I talk, how I invest, how I behave, how I exercise, who I hang out with, just across the board. And so I'm just gonna keep doing that. And then there's where I got that quote from. I'm reading a lot. Well, I'm not reading. I'm listening.
I mean, isn't the work really towards two things: truth and consciousness?
Yeah.
And the whole reason why it's so important to not lie to yourself is because that creates an inconsistent journey. It creates an inconsistency in yourself. Because if you wake up in the morning and say, I'm an Eminent man, I'm an eminent way man or lady, sort of thing, and then you don't see your own internal contradictions, your own internal lies to yourself, truth will never come find you. It will avoid you like the plague. Yeah. So well done. Yeah. And it's, talking about going back to the idea of the Reaper card, this is why it is absolutely vitally important that people do not attribute to themselves qualities that they don't have. Because if you attribute to yourself a quality, a skill, whatever, that you don't have, that summons the Reaper, and it's coming for you. I don't mean like death. I mean like, the Reaper card, right? You can look it up, but it's a force. It's a universal force. It's a maintainer aspect of this universe. Yeah. And so it summons it, right? Let's say that you say, I am highly clairvoyant, right? And you put that out there to the world of, the Madam so-and-so on television or whatever. The Reaper goes, oh, okay, I see a signal. I see a claimant over here, claiming to be highly clairvoyant. And what generates in the in response, right, because there's an equal and opposite response, is highly unclairvoyant. And when the two come to test each other, if it's real, then the Reaper has to take something else away. Okay, and that can be the negative aspects of your life. That can be, the garbage you carry with you, whatever the case might be. It never leaves empty-handed. It will always take something with it. If, however, this is nonsense and you've cast it out there, then it takes it away forever. You will never have the ability to develop it. Not in this life anyway. You got to recycle to do that. You see the danger. That's really dangerous. Yeah. And I, unfortunately, this work specifically is quite littered with that unfortunate aspect. Yeah. So I'm kind of bringing it out because of that. It's important now. Be careful, right? Be careful what you summon the Reaper to. And this is, by the way, when I mentioned, I think it was in the last meeting, that I can't fail this endeavor, that it has to succeed because of the contract. That's exactly what I was talking about, right? Because I am absolutely going to do this because it's solid in me, whatever it takes. Excepting I get hit by a bus tomorrow or something like that, right? It will happen, yeah. And then that's the Reaper taking something else, because at least the resolve is there. It can't take that. Let me see. Yeah,
So-
all right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'd like to make an observation. I'm struggling to find the words, but let me just kind of maybe at least hit the territory. I just want to, and maybe, and give Pierce what you just said, it's a reflection to you, and my original pregnancy of this thought is for Sachin, is that when you say, the garment of the thought, right, that quote, I just want to acknowledge that the quality of the thought from some length of time in the past when we first met to now is highly evident.
Hmm.
And I just didn't want to let this moment pass to acknowledge, and whether it's on this call or afterwards, to reflect the journey,
Right.
to reflect on what the journey has been for you, but I would also add for Pierce in terms of a measure of progress.
Mm.
I just, that in what you said, Sachin, just jumped off the screen for me. And I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge that to all of us, to the ecology of this.
Yeah, I second that very well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it begins.
And I suppose, huh?
So it begins, as they say.
So it begins, yes. And I suppose then the to extend the analogy a bit farther, if language is the garment of thought, then most of the world would be falling in the story of the emperor has no clothes. Right?
That is funny. That is very funny. Yeah.
Okay. How are we on time? Because I feel another run coming on for a little bit, but if we've got a break in 10 minutes, then we break in 10 minutes.
I
I
can
think
go over.
we're okay at our end
We're
if we
good.
run over.
We're good.
All right, good. I'll try to give it what it deserves, but not run all day with it either, which is what it feels like it could do. It has to do with how it started off and some of the things about this idea of model 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to dig something up from 1974 that I was recently putting out there, right, on the website, not for me, Leo, but having to do with the power of the mind and coming back to some old concepts about what was called the A brain and the E brain, right, and those capabilities therein. So it's probably best, so that everyone has the reference. Jeffrey and Molly, do you have the reference to A brain and E brain?
I remember the language of it, but I don't remember the lesson of it.
Right. Okay. So let's go through it. Okay. Give a 101 style lesson, I guess. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see if I can get this ridiculous
I
camera.
can.
All right. Let me fix this. Okay. Good. We good? Okay. This ties in a bit to language. Section, did I ever send you the Alpha Curio bet paper?
You did. I haven't gotten around to reading it, but yeah, you definitely did.
Okay. When you want to talk about consciousness, when you want to talk about things like the power of the mind, it's important to start in the territory, which is everything that houses the mind itself, or the brain. Yeah, and that is the head. Now, in the Alpha Curio bet, H has to do with human, the human aspect. D generally has to do with things in diminishment or lower order. Okay, and you can start to pick apart words and see their frequencies, see their ingredients, what kind of frequencies are at play in a particular word. But what this leaves is the E and the A. So if you've got the idea that a head is something, for human, and at least in this context, and that it is a diminished form of something, it raises the question, what is E and A at this point in time? And this has to do with the two natures of things. The kind of positive and negative, yin and yang, male and female, they're opposite natures. And in the complex, let's see if I can find a smaller piece of chalk. No, brick. Okay. You've got the spine, which we call the A brain, having to do with something ancient. In other words, all vertebrates, right? All vertebrates have it. That is one aspect to it. We can go into the symbology of the A, and then you've got the E brain, which sits in the head and consists of 3 parts. But we don't have access to those parts. Now, let me trigger something in you. I think you've probably recently learned, all of you have recently learned, that the 5 centers, right, the thinking, the moving, the instinctive, the emotional, and the sexual, are kind of the organs, the sense organs, if you will, of the personality. I don't think you knew that before, right? That's their function. It makes you think, what's a personality really for? Now, just like you have the 5 physical senses, which are the organs for the body, right? It's got to be able to interact with the world in some way, shape, or form. It's got to be able to receive. The centers do that on behalf of the body or the I of the personality. You with me so far? Now, are you? Kind of? Yeah. See, it's coming in so much faster, right? So I've got to keep up with it. Now, come back to this board here, because if that's indeed the case, that you have 5 force processors, right? Your 5 physical senses for the body, and you have 5 force processors, known as the 5 centers for the personality, then that also must mean that in the terms of a brain life, the life of the brain itself, there must be 5 aspects. And those 5 aspects correlate to the vowels. So you've got A, having to do with the spine, I should say, and what's called the no brain, all right, the first brain. You've got E, having to do with the one in the head. And then inside of that, you've got I, O, and U, each corresponding to an aspect of either lunar, solar, or planetary. Well, I being solar, O being planetary, and U being lunar. Those all sit inside the head. Okay, I, O, U, and this is the E brain. All right, I'm just drawing it like schematically at this point in time. Now, are you catching what I'm talking about now with these 5 organs? Because you've got 1, 2 being the encapsulation, 3, 4, 5. These 5 sense organs within this. Now, what does it mean? We've used the term so many times. Man is a 3-brained being. Man is a 3-brained being. Right? It's not true when said like that. Undeveloped man is a 2-brained being. All it has access to is A and E. You have no consciousness. Well, I mean, clearly you have no consciousness of what's subconscious in you, right? Or semi-conscious. You have very little consciousness of. The only thing that you have consciousness of is that generalism that we call the E brain, this brain up in here, right? What's buried inside of it, we don't know. Part of the process of development is getting from this into these specific areas, into the conscious, semi-conscious, and unconscious aspects. It's only at that point in time that you can be said to actually be a creature with 3 brains. That's also what it means to be Model 3. In other words, having conscious resource and access to what is now unconscious in you. But I will say that that's kind of symptomatic. In other words, that's not the goal. It's symptomatic. And what happens is, like, you know, we have these ideas of the tuning fork principle that you've learned about. You know the tuning fork principle? Let me reiterate just in case you don't, okay? So the tuning fork principle is, you know, if I have a tuning fork used to tune a musical instrument, tuned to the note of A, and I hand it to Sachin, and I've got another one over here, and I strike mine. If he listens carefully, his will ring in sympathy. All right. This is the foundation of all what would be called magic. Yeah. You know, magicians, right? Creepy magicians. Magicians will gather things into their environment. Like if they want to invoke a Saturnian force, then they will begin to fill their environment with symbols and signs and all sorts of various things. I'm not going to draw that one actually. I don't want it in here, but it'll work. But you see, they start collecting things like if they're trying to induce a certain astrological element because they think it will help their quote unquote working. Yeah, they'll bring all of these different things in. They'll wear the correct colors. They'll do all of this because of the tuning fork principle. It brings it in. Well, the tuning fork principle goes all the way up and down creation. Because when you get to a certain point in your development that we call sort of the activation of the pineal gland in the middle, it begins to radiate inside your head, in here, right? And it forms, if you were to take this kind of as above or as above, so below aspect, it forms in the center of your head a star, a literal star like our sun or like Sirius, except on a smaller level. Now, what's a star without a planet? So you've got this aspect, right? And it goes, ah. And it then, in its lowercase form, projecting something off, it then casts something out of itself, and you end up with, you can't see this third board, okay. Get rid of Saturn here. All right, inside begins to radiate. This is the head, right? Nose, eyes. Inside it begins to radiate inside, right? And then it begins to project something that isn't a planet, but is the equivalent of a planet in electrical form above your head. And if you can see electrically, you start to see this little spark shoot up, and it begins to create something. It like ejects a piece of itself, not just like our sun ejects its planets from itself. And this continues to happen, and it continues to create others and others and others until you have 9. Now, what happens at this point in time, once you have all 9 of those, is you begin to have this inner sense in yourself of like what the earth, this earth, I'm not in your line of sight anymore. You get to get this sense inside yourself of what this planet is doing, because you have an earth in your aura, a small one, but same frequency. You see where I'm bringing like magic and tuning fork principle into it. And then you develop a Mars, and you then gain the knowings of Mars and Mercury and Venus and Saturn and Jupiter and so on and so forth. Okay? This is what development is. But what Model 3 is that, because then you become activated. Once you have a sun, planet, and moon in this machinery up in here, well, we're talking about doing things like aggregation, which is what the moon is doing, right? You aggregate knowledge. And think of it from those terms. When you're learning about occult and esoteric things, that's a lunar function. Becoming conscious of it is entering into that IOU circle back there, all right? When you begin to make produce out of it, that's a planetary function. The planet is ripe with produce. Yeah? You begin to have, manifest produce out of it. The sun level aspect of it is when you can actually project it to someone or something else. And that's the part most people are kind of still aggregating towards, and getting to that point in time of being able to have what's in here go to someone else. And then we start talking about things like telepathy on a real level, clairvoyance on a real level, not just speaking about it, but it actually becoming a reality. Being able to know things. And I'll tell you one thing. You want to know about ancient Egypt, for example, or ancient Persia, or whatever. Get a planet, an Earth, in your aura and live out the civilization. Watch it. Watch its history. You're part of that. I'm still pointing up here, so I'm going to come back down to me. So these are hinters. Oh, there's a new word. Speaking of language, these are hinters about what Model 3 is kind of like. Yeah. Now imagine whenever from now, when that is just the way things are, imagine what society is going to be like. First of all, you can't lie in that condition because everyone will see it instantly. Yeah? You can't hold contradiction in yourself or you will disintegrate electrically. Yeah? You won't be able. I mean, we're talking about a very different society. You know, think about it this way, right? Think about the differences between so-called caveman, just clubbing things or whatever, and modern man. That's the kind of difference that we're talking about here. It's almost unrecognizable. But the Model 3 idea is being able to get to that IOU part of having consciousness. And this, I think all of you were here, except for maybe not Molly, but most of you were here for the lesson that the like hour-long or 2-hour-long lesson I did on numbers, numerology. And I think it spanned actually a couple of different lessons. Do you remember this, where I drew the 0 and then, you know, had the like compass, and we talk about the division of nothingness into somethingness, and this idea. Yeah, do you remember this? I'll try and find the video. Okay, yeah. And then we went to 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. But if you think about it from this standpoint, consciousness is the fundamental act of creation. I'll repeat that. Consciousness is the fundamental act of creation. Because if you can cast your minds and brains and emotions and everything back into the point before all of this existed. In other words, there's just this 0, this nullity that has the potential of being everything, but isn't yet, right? God before the Big Bang, nothing. Then its first act would have been to separate this one thing, this unity, I suppose, right? That would have been its first act, is to become a unity. Second act would have been to separate that unity into duality so that it could see itself, so that it could get a sense of this is me and that is it. You see, when it's like this, you can't do it. Yeah? If you're a unity, you can't see yourself. You have to separate out. All right. We're going through the same process in this kind of work. It's just called self-observation. It's creative process, right? It's the same thing God did in the very beginning to make all of this. Minor nuances, since we already have a creative world, but you begin to look at yourself. You go from that nullity, that nothingness, into something that can see itself for what it is. And in time, you create an entire universe out of yourself. This is what consciousness is. This is what development is. It's an act of creation. It's easy because, you know, there's so many trinkets and toys and wonderful things to look at and examine and explore in this work. It's absolutely incredible. But the fact of the matter is that we are literally dealing in the creation, the creational aspect of consciousness itself. That's it. Easy as that. And if you keep the pressure up, I imagine it took a considerable amount of will for God in the beginning to go from a unity into a duality and hold that state of being for a while. It probably kept, just like when we try to observe ourselves, it probably kept slipping back into unity for a time, right? The universe probably went, boom, back together, right? Probably for eons, it might have done this until enough pressure was developed to be able to keep that separation. And the rest is pretty much mechanical, or I should say automatic. Not mechanical, but the rest is pretty much automatic. The creation of a universe at that point in time. Just like if you get beyond a certain resistance in yourself to your own development, the rest also comes fairly automatically. It's not like you have to try so hard. You know, the man number 1, 2, and 3, once you get to man number 4, if you just keep doing the right things, it's pretty simple. You get to 5, 6, so on and so forth. Yeah. The work is right at the beginning. The rest of it's easy. Did you know this? Did you realize this? Or did you think that the rest of your journey was going to be nothing but struggle?
No, I think they say well begun is half done.
Speak up.
They say well begun is half done.
I like that.
Like,
Yeah.
if you really think, if you really strategize, if you really work hard in the beginning, then you've got the consistency, you've got the practice, you've got the rules set. After that, it's execution. Oftentimes, it feels easier afterwards.
I will give one warning, because it's actually quite important. The mechanics of things is it is possible to go from person 1, 2, or 3 to person number 5 without ever having gone to 4. There are examples of this, and it always goes deranged in the end. All right, it fixes development as I don't even know how to put it. A highly advanced lunatic, I guess, would be the right way to say it, right? You have to do the work of 3 to 4 or 1 to 4 or 2 to 4. Once you get there, establish yourself at 4, then naturally 5, 6, and 7 can come. But it is possible to bypass it, short circuit it. And it has to do with being exposed to highly esoteric things long before your systems are capable of processing it.
Is that the shortcut in the Gurdjieff ray of creation, all planets?
I don't know. Explain what you mean.
So my understanding, if I recall it, the model correctly, is that there is moon level, planet level, then there's all planets, and then there's sun.
Mm.
But I understand that there's a shortcut that's within the model that allows a skip over of all planets.
I'm unaware of that fourth way teaching.
Okay.
For some reason, it doesn't sound like something Gurdjieff might say, but maybe one of his students. Because Gurdjieff was very much about the fact that man needs to work. You know, that you can't, that there is a shortcut, but it doesn't lead to a fruitful result. You know?
Right.
It's usually an accident, by the way. You know, if you get a kid growing up in an environment that is very, very punchy, for example, and the parents know a lot and can do a lot, then it can sort of push a person into that area without having done the work. Yeah, you get extremely knowledgeable people without a lot of ability, and then in the end, they get some ability, but it's inconsistent. Anyway, we don't need to belabor that. We're not heading down that course. I just want to make you aware of it, that it is a possibility. We don't need to worry about that because we are slow and steady wins the race. That's how we're approaching this. All right. That was a compressed version of a run that could have gone on for about 6 hours about the brains and IOU. What I would like you to think about and really piece together is this idea of the as above, so below aspect of things, because there is really, it works that way across the board. If something is going on in the heavens, like the creation of planets or moons or brand new systems, solar systems, whatnot, if it's going on in the heavens, it is or at least can be going on in you. It won't always be obvious in what form it takes, and it won't always be happening unless you put yourself in an ecology to do it. But if you do, there is an exact similarity between all different octaves. Yours, the octave of the planet, the octave of our solar system, and so on and so forth. Okay? The key to development is there. It's not, it was never hidden. We just got really kind of too sucked into our own personalities to figure that out. Yeah. I do need to tidy one more other thing up. Two other things. Number one, the personality is not evil, okay? It's there to be developed and then used as a fuel source for your essence. All right. If you have no personality, your essence never stands a chance. You take a country bumpkin, if you will, right? Someone who's doesn't have a lot of personality, but is very in touch with nature. They have a lot of essence, but they can't grow to the extent that you can by having this kind of culturalized addition to oneself. Like your quote, right? If you're lost, the answer is education. Yes, by all means, study everything. Yeah, everything.
Well, I think in that case, both the education and the action is there's just not enough opportunity to get both of those for somebody in that situation, because their scope is limited, right. And what your action is not as well. The action could be impactful, but again, not as much. I think if you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, his only hope is to go join a monastery that's heavy on the mentality, right? To be able to fill his white stock. We call it white stock. Yeah.
Pierce, I wanted to kind of get in, the conversation or the talk that you had about how difficult it is in the beginning and how easy it becomes once you have a set of rules and you have the habit and the consistency. Right? What has happened, or what is it right now, why it also feels difficult, is because there is a habit, there is a consistency, except it's the wrong one. So you have to break out of that, and that's very difficult. You have to break out of that. You have to sort of, unhabit. I don't know what the right word for this. You have to change. You have to go back to being a very basic level 1 human first. Because what you're level 2 or level 3, whatever level you are at, you're very malformed because of our culture and because of upbringing. So you have to undo that first before you can start to go put the right things in place, which is why it feels hard.
Let me say this though, there is an aspect to all of this development work that everyone somewhere inside, because everyone is animated with a spirit and with a soul, everyone somewhere inside knows for a fact that they can be more, that they are fall short of what it means even to be human, right? This aspect. The reason why things like looking at the aspects of your personality and doing this active creation by self-observation is because it puts your essence in a position where it's already smart enough to know how to fix you. It just doesn't have the permission, but it puts it in a position to be able to recognize the things that need to be corrected, and it empowers it, I guess is the right thing to say. Yeah, it's like if you have a company with a CEO and just a bunch of workers, then they're never going to feel empowered, are they? Right? You have to promote someone. You have to say, okay, you are the business operations manager now, okay? And that empowers that person to do things, to make changes. This is what's happening with the essence. Right now, we have personality, which is like this big, and we have essence, which is this big, and there's no contact between the two of them, all right? This is the unempowered essential aspect. Learning about things like esoteric knowledge begins to create a connection between this and the personality, so that then it can observe. It can look at the personality and go, aha, right, that's what this organism does, you see. And at some point in time, it actually becomes master of that. And the rest, again, fairly automatic. I mean, that is person number 4. once you have this click over between the personality being the active, the master, and the essence being absent or passive, once that reversal takes place, then you're there. That's man number 4, person number 4. That's all there is to it. Go read lesson 5. Go watch lesson 5. It's all talked about in there. All right, in Core 101 at eminentway.org. See, we're talking octaves here, aren't we? This is the ray of creation of how to get to lesson 5. Yeah? All right. As above, so below. It does actually apply everywhere. Everything you're learning here. Yeah. I mean, everything you learn here, please start to try and find in the natural worlds. It is there. And if you find something in the natural worlds, please try and find it in yourself. And that's all there is to this work. Yeah? In that sense, it's very Taoist, actually. Yeah? That's what the Taoists were all about. They were just go look at nature and apply it to themselves. And they did the work of this work long before we did. If you don't know anything about Taoism, you should probably go look at it a little bit, because it's very much eminent way, just 5,000 years old. The methods, the approach. Okay. Yeah, was it good? Useful? Good. That was too much of a whirlwind. Let's open this up a little more slowly. Sometimes I'm in a position where if I don't give expression, at least a little bit of expression to something, it won't shut up and it'll keep me up for days. So had to do it. All right.
I do feel like I'm spinning a little bit from that. Just
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm spinning. I'm spinning a little bit from that.
Yeah. We'll make some time to open it up more slowly next time. This is like you've got. Let's put it this way: you have the signal of it now. Now it can begin to grow in you and can begin to have some work, and we can talk about it and work through it. Very important, though. Especially that whole Power of the Mind document that's also on the website, right? That is absolutely loaded to the max with gems that need 6 hours of explanation each. I think each one of those papers in there could literally be an entire day's worth of work for us. So I'm also inclined to do it because it was so encapsulated that I think the world really needs it. It needs to be opened up and actually done something with. No one's ever done anything with this. So it's good for the world, good for people. Yeah. All right. Ciao, everyone. See you next week. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.